From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. K-State's Gregg Ibendahl will talk about his new estimates of non-irrigated farmland lease rates for each county in Kansas. He says this is very useful information as you tenants and landlords negotiate leases for the next cropping season. Also, K-State's Cassandra Olds talks with Jamie Lynn Farney about late summer control of flies for pasture cattle. She explains why those fly populations tend to build up at this stage of the summer and offers her recommendations on controlling those for the remainder of the grazing season. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Zac Hoppenstedt talks about the basic approaches to organic home gardening. All that and more right here on Agriculture Today. We're glad to have you tuned in for this Agriculture Today on the K-State Radio Network. We're going to dive into yet new information from the Agricultural Economics Department here at Kansas State University. This has just been posted to that agmanager.info website. It is data on 2021 Kansas county level now cash rental rates for non-irrigated cropland. It's very insightful, as a matter of fact, as you look at the numbers. And the one responsible for putting this together is with us now, K-State Research and Extension Farm Management Economist Gregg Ibendahl. Gregg, the intent behind creating these estimates, let's get right to that. What was your objective here?
Well, what we're really looking for is kind of creating a starting point where tenants and landlords can kind of get together and discuss what the rental rates should be for their property. So the numbers we post, they're not set in stone and saying, well, this is what it has to be. We're just trying to provide some guidance based on what we look at when we look at, expected net revenue for the county and how that would translate to a cash rental rate, and just give folks maybe a starting point, because obviously an individual farmer's particular piece of land, it could be better or worse than the county average, but we're just kind of giving them a starting point to go from. And really, there's not really good information out there about what might be a good rental rate for your particular farm. I mean, you can always hear coffee shop talk, but you never know where that's reliable or not. And USDA, NASS, they do a survey every year, too, of rental rates. But again, whether you believe those, and they're probably a little behind on what the current rates are here. So this is just to provide a better estimate for folks negotiating cash rental rates for next year.
And we do want to get at how you approach this, because that's important. But let's stress, it is a county-level number you're providing here. So it does have a localized flavor to it.
Yeah, so we're just looking at what we have reported to us for dryland yields for the county and using that as our starting point, kind of based on what we look at for kind of average prices for the state. So that's kind of goes what into that. So again, if your basis is a little better average than what the state is, that could affect that to some degree. And certainly the quality within the land is going to affect that. Not all land within the county is going to be the same as the average for the county here. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this, as we do base these on county averages.
Before we talk about the mechanics, noting here that the numbers that you'll cite and that are reflected in this report cover all of the expenses associated with that rental arrangement?
Yeah, we're using a little different approach than what we have used in the past when we come up with these cash rental rates. So we're using what's called the tenant's residual approach. So what we do is we subtract all the costs, the cash costs, and all the fixed costs, and we also subtract a cost for interest holding charge and then for unpaid operator labor in that too. So once you cover all costs, really what's left over is what you can use to pay for cash rental rates, and that's our approach for this particular paper.
Is that a more representative approach, do you think, this tenant's residual?
Well, I don't know if it's any better or worse than what we used before. I just had better data to go about using it this way. There's about 2 or 3 approaches you could take when looking at what might be a fair cash rental rate. This is just one of the recommended approaches. I think I'd use Iowa State has a good publication about this, detailing some of the information about how you might approach a cash rental rate for your particular property, and this is just one of the recommended approaches that they have.
But it encompasses the key elements here, including income, including yields, prices, expenses. Everything is accounted for here by and large?
Yeah, so to get the revenue, we're looking obviously at the average county yields. We're looking at expected prices. We're looking at government payments for the revenue side and all the expenses we would have, the typical cash expenses you would have. And then we're also looking to cover all the fixed costs. And not only, fixed costs for things like machinery, but then again, also the cost for unpaid operator labor and also a management charge in there as well here. So really, you should be covering every cost that you would go into looking at to farm a piece of property. And once we subtract those out, if there's anything left after you do that from what our gross revenue number is, that's the number you can use then to go about renting ground.
And just mining a little deeper, say the yields, you're using Farm Service Agency data there.
Yeah, so part of the problem in Kansas especially is that, obviously a lot of folks probably use the USDA NASS reported yields, but they're not always good about, and especially the last several years, not always good about separating out what is a yield for irrigated ground versus the yield for dryland ground. So the FSA numbers that they have, they actually report those separately. So this particular publication is just looking at non-irrigated ground. I will have a companion paper coming out in the next several weeks looking at actually the cash rental rates for irrigated ground.
Looking forward to that. And the expenses, you're leaning on that vast data from the Kansas Farm Management Association.
Yeah, so that's just where it gets a little bit on the tricky side for what I had to do here. So we have really good information from our KFMA farms about whole farm numbers. What we have less information, though, about is information about individual crop enterprises. We have some, but certainly not as near as developed as what our whole farm numbers is. So I use kind of a procedure where I looked at the enterprise studies that we have across the state, and I use that as a way to allocate expenses for the whole farm back to individual crops on a particular farm. So a little bit complicated in the math, but I think it does give me a pretty good handle for what the crop expenses are for a particular crop on a particular farm in a particular county.
And the time horizon here, you're looking at roughly 5 years of data in each of these categories?
Yes, for 5 years for everything. For the yields and such, I just use a 5-year average because I figure that's pretty close to the trend line thing. When it comes to the revenue side and prices, I kind of used a little bit of a weighting average, kind of put more weight on the more recent years and a little bit less on some of the more years that are a little bit further away. To do that, to kind of, because we are kind of projecting ahead too here. So not only am I looking at the last 4 years, but I'm also trying to get an estimate for what net farm income is for this year. So I have to do a little bit of a projecting forward for what I think things are going to look like in the future.
In the end, Greg, what you've created here is a map of the state of Kansas, which depicts county by county the average rental rate for non-irrigated crop ground for that individual county. And it's very easy to interpret there. What are you seeing in the way of trends as you look at those numbers?
Well, I guess it's not totally unsurprising to me. So as you might guess, the map is color-coded, so the darker the color is, the higher the rental rate is we have per acre. And as you get to lighter colors, the lower the rental rate per acre is. So as you might expect, we see higher rents in the eastern part of the state, particularly the northeast corner of the state is where our highest cash rents are. And then they get lower as you move west across the state. And then certainly probably the lowest rental rates would be in the southwest part of the state.
As you look at those numbers and those differences, what do you see as the driving factors that stand out then?
Well, I think so. When we're allocating crop expenses, we're actually allocating crop expenses on a crop reporting district. So there's 9 crop reporting districts in the state here. So I get an average per crop for the crop reporting district. I guess the thing that struck me, though, is there is more variability. It's not quite the smooth transition going from east to west as you might think. In fact, if you look at the southern part of the state, it's higher, obviously, in the eastern part, but then it kind of goes lower, and then it kind of actually goes back up a little bit in some of those mid-southwest counties, and then before it starts to go back down again. So it's not quite as smooth as what I might have expected, but again, that a lot of variability within the counties and from one county to the next. But again, I'm just using what FSA has reported for the yields for those counties here. So I'm pretty much telling the story that the data gives me to tell. So there's nothing magical in what I have done here.
But the overall trend is to the upside as far as those rental rates.
Yeah, I think if you look at the NASS surveys especially, I think most farmers would agree with me about this, is that, they're obviously behind a little bit because there is some delay between asking the survey and before they finally get reported, probably at least maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And then you always run the problem is, well, how accurate are farmers actually reporting these? Is this based on what they've already been renting something for maybe 2 or 3 years ago? I don't think it always reflects what the current rental pattern is. So as you might imagine, with net farm income increasing in the state for the last 5 years, I would expect those rental prices that we're looking at for next year should be well above what or at least above what we have seen in the past couple of years. And I think my numbers that I calculated actually do show that. So in almost all cases, my reported number for cash rental rates for the next year are going to be higher than what NAS has reported in pretty much about a year ago when they came up with the last estimate.
Well, you touched on this just briefly there, but how you hope farmers and landlords, obviously, will utilize this information. It's not an absolute number, the set rental rate for a given county, but how would you like those interested to interpret it?
Yeah, I don't want someone to go out and say, well, this is what K-State is saying for the rental rate is supposed to be for the county. And that's not the idea behind this. This is really saying, well, this is kind of a suggested number for the average part of the state. Let's use that as our negotiating point where we're going to talk about what rental rates should be. And, the tenants can make his case for why they should be lower. The landlord can make their case for why it should be higher. But in the end, as an economist, what we consider to be a fair cash rental rate is what both parties agree to, and as long as they're not coerced into agreeing to a particular number here. So as long as both parties, make that decision and under their free will with no constraints behind that, that is considered to be a fair lease. That could be higher, could be lower than what our numbers that we are reporting.
Very well. Well, use this as a hub, if you will, of discussion for negotiating those non-irrigated rental rates in the relative near future here as you look to 2022 production. All of this information expressed a couple of ways in the actual map, county by county numbers, also broken down in table form where you can look at the trends as they would cross various regions of the state and compare the numbers there if you're so inclined. This article is now posted on the agmanager.info website out of K-State. What you're looking for, and it's right there handy in the middle of the page, 2021 Kansas county level cash rental rates for non-irrigated cropland. Looking forward to seeing the version that measures irrigated cropland rental values of the same nature. And Greg, we'll have you back then, hopefully. Many thanks to you.
All right, thanks.
That from farm management economist Gregg Ibendahl, K-State Research and Extension, the author of this brand new analysis and publication out of K-State. We'll be back with more for you in a few moments. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. We're back now on Agriculture Today. Well, this miserable heat we have going for us this week is hard on livestock, no question. But it doesn't seem to deter those hordes of flies that swirl around our cattle on grass. If it seems to you producers that fly numbers are picking up, you're not wrong, according to a K-State expert. What more can a producer do to ease that fly pressure on pasture cattle for the remainder of the summer grass season? K-State's veterinary entomologist, Cassandra Olds, offered her expertise on that in a recent podcast hosted by K-State beef systems specialist Jamie Lynn Farney.
Why do we have a much higher fly population late in the summer?
So actually, it's interesting. We actually have two peaks in population. We get a population peak early in summer, and those are from all the immature stages that were overwintering and those first ones that came out from the overwintering adult population. And then we sort of see populations dip off a little bit into the middle of summer where it starts to get a little bit drier and a little bit hotter. And then what happens is later in summer towards early fall, when we start getting a little bit more rainfall, then we start seeing a second peak in fly populations. And so what's happening right now is that we're actually going into that second peak. So really for insects populations to do well, they need humidity and they need a food source. And that's a food source for the adults, but also a food source for the young. So a lot of us have had hay bales that have been standing out for a while. Then you get a lot of rain coming in. So now all of a sudden you've got moist, decaying hay. And so that is a great place, especially if you've still got animals feeding around these hay bales. You get some manure mixed in there, some urine. And all of a sudden, you've got absolutely perfect stable fly breeding areas, and you'll see populations shoot up just from having those round bales out and there being a little bit more moisture.
And in the cattle industry, we really worry about fly numbers. There's been some data out there that says there is an economic threshold, especially on horn flies. That, a certain number results in reduction in production. What is that number?
So the number is between 200 and 300 flies per animal, which really isn't a lot. And so most cattle that we see, especially at this time of the year, have way more than 200 to 300 flies per side, not even total. And, so they really are a problem. And they're a problem because, both the male and the female adult flies are obligate blood feeders. So what that means is that they have to feed on blood to survive. And so each fly can take 20 to 30 meals a day. So each individual fly that you see will bite that animal 20 to 30 times and take a meal. So if you think about the fact you've got 300 flies, each biting, let's say, an average of 25 times, each taking a little bit of blood each time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it really starts to become a problem. And so they've also done studies that have shown that the higher number of flies you have on an animal, the higher the cortisol levels are. So the animals, even if they don't seem stressed, they are under stress. So often you'll see them kind of bunching, trying to get away from the flies. You'll see a lot of flicking of their head. High stable fly numbers, you can see animals standing in water to get away from the stable flies. So the horn flies you normally find on the back of the animal. The stable flies you find more along the legs of the animal. So biting flies in general cause a lot of problem, not only for blood loss, some mastitis comes from horn flies. So I would say horn flies are really our biggest problem and something that we try and control. The problem is that we have large-scale resistance to most of our pesticides. So it used to be that spraying was enough. You could put in an ear tag or you could spray. These products aren't working like they used to anymore. And that is because the flies develop resistance really, really quickly. If you think about the fact that each fly and resistance to pesticides is a genetic determinant. They have the genes for this. And so if you have a fly who has a couple of hundred offspring and your generation time is a week to 2 weeks, you can really spread that resistance quickly throughout the population. And that's why you can find that your product that was working at the beginning of the year, by the end of the year, isn't working, because of the fact that you had this genetic resistance spread through your entire population. So those flies that are resistant to the pesticide have gone and replaced all the other flies that were susceptible. And then that pesticide isn't going to work no matter how much you apply of it. So that's the big problem with flies, and that might be why producers are seeing things that did work no longer work. So we always suggest that they rotate chemicals every year, and rotate chemicals between different chemical classes. So rotate a pyrethroid with an organophosphate and then a macrocyclic lactone. And all three of these are available as ear tags. So you could just each year use a specific type of ear tag. And so if a producer is getting resistance on a ear tag that he's been using for 10 or 15 years, then, it's time to switch. So every year you switch out your ear tag. 1 year use a pyrethroid, 1 year an organophosphate, and then 1 year a macrocyclic lactone. If you have the option to put in another ear tag, go ahead and put in another ear tag. But obviously, it depends on whether you can round up the animals and things like that. But what you can do is, let's say you don't want to use an ear tag, but you wanted to use a spray. Use a spray of the same chemical class. So if you put in a pyrethroid ear tag, use a pyrethroid spray. You don't want to then use an organophosphate spray, because what you're doing is you're just giving them exposure to two things at once, which again drives the resistance. So stick to a single chemical class for a year and each year swap them out.
We use insect growth regulators. And a lot of guys will do that during the summer.
Yeah.
Or what do you think on that?
For your audience to understand, what insect growth regulators do is they inhibit the process of growth. So when you feed an IGR, you'll still see larvae in the manure or in your substrate, but it inhibits the adult from emerging from the pupa. So they go through this rearrangement stage where every cell in their bodies that they have during a larval stage has to transform into an adult flying stage. So it goes from a maggot to a fly, and the pupal stage, that's that little brown grain of rice looking thing, that's when it's busy doing its arrangement thing. It's all the cells are rearranging. And so an IGR actually stops that rearrangement process from happening properly. So you don't get adult flies emerging. And I will say on IGRs, it's really important that you dose correctly and make sure that each animal is getting the correct dose. Because if you're just, free feeding and one animal's a fatty and he eats a lot of it, and one animal doesn't like the feed so much and eats more grass, the amount of the IGR in the manure might be too low in some animals. So this is giving you not only a place for these larval stages to carry on and do their cycle, but with any kind of control measure, you want to make sure that your dosing is accurate and you're not skimping on it, because resistance to IGRs can develop. There's almost this idea out there that you can't develop resistance to IGRs, but you most definitely can, and it's been reported in the literature. So IGRs, treat them the same way you would any other control product. Make sure that you're dosing correctly and making sure that each animal gets the correct dose.
The fly tags and IGR are the most common, and sprays are most commonly used. Is there anything else out there that shows promise or has been shown beneficial to help with regulation of those late season flies?
Well, there's the good old-fashioned trap, the Bruce's trap, which is a walk-through trap, which is honestly one of the best things we've ever got. The problem is getting cattle to walk through that daily. If you've got a smaller number of animals and you can make them pass through a trap every day, that's going to absolutely annihilate your hornfly population at any time of the year. So I'm always a big proponent of these walk-through traps, and there's schematics online and you can build them yourself, because what happens is you're just scraping the flies off the animal. They get stuck in the traps. They die very soon after. They've got to be on a host constantly or they die. So that's a great way to get rid of them. Some products are coming up onto the market now. Those of you who have horses will see that there's now fly sprays for horses that have essential oils in them. And so what these are is it's a mixture of essential oils, and it does have a killing activity. It also has a repellency, and repellency is actually good for blood feeders, because you would think that you just want to kill them, but the number of eggs that they will lay, the adult female, is directly in relation to how much blood she took up and how well she fed. So if you make your animal smell not that great, and maybe she doesn't like the smell of it, and so she feeds a little bit, but then gives up and then comes back and feeds a little bit. By interrupting that feeding, it means that she takes up less blood, which means she lays less eggs. So just by making animals less attractive smelling can dissuade flies from feeding effectively. So we've got some companies who are now looking into making these kind of products. And this is going to be great because it gives us an alternative that's not conventional pesticides. So anybody who has resistance could use one of these essential oil-based products and hopefully get some relief from that. So I think in the next sort of 5 years, we're really going to get 5 to 10 years, we're going to get a lot of products on the market that are different to our conventional pesticides that should hopefully help us manage these.
K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds joining K-State's Jamie Lynn Farney on her latest podcast, which you can hear in its entirety by searching for Dr. J's Beef. This is Agriculture Today. Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and continuing on now with today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The Senate Judiciary Committee conducted another hearing yesterday on concentration and consolidation issues in the cattle market, particularly exploring the reasons for price disparities, the lack of price transparency, and what can be done to expand competition in the industry. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, the ranking member on the committee, questioned Tyson Fresh Meats Group President Shane Miller as to why price disparity is occurring. Miller told the committee a lack of packing capacity is not to blame for a divide between live cattle and boxed beef prices. He said, quoting him, "What we pay our cattle feeders truly depends on market conditions." Grassley said in his prepared remarks that the amount of cattle traded on the cash market in the early 2000s was more than 50%, but today has dropped to only 20%. And Grassley went on to say that although some producers have gained advantages through alternative marketing agreements, lack of price transparency, he says, undermines such efforts. Whether producers choose to sell cattle through sale barns or formula contracts, such as alternative agreements, is up to the producers themselves, in Miller's words. Now, the president of Fed Beef at JBS USA, Tim Shellpepper, said that JBS is in the cash market every day. Quoting him, "We're in numerous sale barns every day. We're also a very active participant in the video market, so we are very much a supporter of the cash market." Though much has been made by federal lawmakers and others about the negative effects of growing market consolidation in agriculture, Miller said that Tyson believes that market forces are working as they should. Though USDA recently touted a new program and $500 million in funds to grow livestock processing capacity through smaller facilities to address market concerns, Tyson's Miller said the move will likely have little effect. Now, earlier yesterday, the head of the Agricultural Economics Department at Purdue University, Jason Lusk, told the House Subcommittee on Livestock and Foreign Agriculture that expanding capacity would help support future cattle prices, but won't be a long-term advantage. The USDA's Rod Bain has more.
How is the beef supply chain rebounding from the series of black swan events that impacted that industry over the last 2 years?
Beef cattle system responded remarkably well. Cattle prices have been on the rise. Consumer demand is strong.
2020's cattle backlog is nearly cleared. Year-over-year cattle prices are already improving and should continue to do so through the second half of 2021 and beyond.
Purdue University economist Jason Lutz and Rabo Agri-Finance analyst Dustin Ahern with their takes before a House Ag Subcommittee Wednesday. Hearing witnesses also testified on what considerations should be made to prevent future supply chain disruptions. One recommendation from the University of Minnesota's Jennifer Vandelight is improved comprehensive cybersecurity measures. As in the food and ag space,
all of these businesses are individually vulnerable to cyber attack. On a broader scale, though, the food system is one of the most interconnected systems within the critical infrastructures.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Also this week on Capitol Hill, the Senate Finance Committee held a hearing on Tuesday to examine the status of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement 1 year after that pact started. Canada's inadequate implementation of new market access for U.S. dairy, Mexico's foot-dragging on agricultural biotech approvals, and the lack of a chief agriculture negotiator nominee were some of the key ag-related issues brought up there. The U.S. dairy industry has expressed exasperation at what they charge is a lack of Canada implementing the dairy provisions of the USMCA that were supposed to bring more market access for U.S. dairy products into Canada. Another big concern among lawmakers and the ag industry, Mexico's lack of action on biotech crop approvals, despite the agreement's provisions requiring the approvals process be science-based. Now, Biotechnology Innovation Organization President Michelle McMurray Heath told lawmakers that the failure of Mexico to approve several new GMO crop varieties has no basis in science. She called the situation particularly disturbing. In her words, not only are innovative agricultural businesses suffering, but also the investors that really support their work. Next up on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. And with that, as always, is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Margot Ellerman is joining us. She is a family and consumer sciences teacher in the Valley Falls School District. And Margot, you participated in the Kansas Soybean Commission's Kansas Soybeans as a Food Educational Program. Can you first tell us what its purpose is and what made you want to participate?
This program is for all schools that all you have to do is apply. You can apply fall and spring semesters, and you are awarded $2 per student to be able to share the information that the Soybean Commission has available for us to utilize and teach students about soybean in your classroom.
It sounds like the fun part for you is that you like to incorporate it in several of your lessons, in several of your classes, too.
I use it in our nutrition and wellness classes, culinary arts, culinary essentials, my introduction to family and consumer science classes, and a wide range of information is able to be used. Starting with nutrition and wellness, most of our soy food contains no cholesterol, little or no saturated fat, and high quality in protein and dietary fiber, which really is incorporated into nutrition and wellness. And we study a lot of projects about healthy eating and healthy diets and how to incorporate more quality products and protein in our diet. And then from the culinary essentials class and culinary arts, we might start with a taste test part activity. And one of my favorites is pulling out the edamame and making a dip. And students really enjoy that. And then tofu is, we have learned how it absorbs flavors of what you're cooking, and you really don't even know that it's in there. And wide range from soy milk, chocolate, baking mixes, all have soy products in it. And then I like to have my students make a presentation and use it as a project-based learning where they come up with a project and share it with other students. So I've had high school kids share with my middle school class on soy products and show their presentation and share the ingredients that were used that were actually soy. And I'm actually looking forward to this year. We are starting a new ag program and working with our ag program and maybe do a project together where we could learn more about how the soybeans are grown and then come bring it to my class and then maybe come up with a food product. So that's true farm to table.
And if you'd like more information, you can go to kansassoybeans.org to get that information about the Kansas Soybeans as a Food program. That is Margot Ellerman. She's a family and consumer sciences teacher in the Valley Falls School District, and she joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. Greg Akagi there. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Rounding out this Agriculture Today, this week's horticulture segment for you. Once more, we're going to preview another of those K-State Garden Hour presentations. The series is resuming after a brief hiatus. The next of these is set for this coming Wednesday, August the 4th. And the topic of choice this time around will be organic gardening. Enlisted to talk about that during this Garden Hour webinar is Zac Hoppenstedt. He is a Johnson County Extension horticulture agent. Zac, what is meant by organic gardening by definition?
Well, Eric, thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller. We've seen an increasing demand for organic food from consumers, and then obviously a huge boom in gardening over the last couple of years. And the pandemic had a little bit of an influence on that. And gardeners and consumers that have a preference for organic agriculture, organic fruits and vegetables. And, there's kind of a strict definition for commercial producers. USDA has their national organic program. And largely the kind of 10,000-foot view on the National Organic Program is using inputs on the farm, fertilizers and pesticides that are derived from natural sources rather than synthetic chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Chemical-free, is it exclusively that, though?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the best part, or maybe the important distinction in between an organic farmer and an organic gardener is there's no superiority in comparing organic to conventional agriculture. Mm-hmm. Even in an organic farm or organic garden, they'll have a lot of the same pests and disease issues. And a lot of conventional producers will choose non-chemical interventions before they finally get to the point of a pesticide or some sort of chemical application to control that problem. But there are many steps to take before we get to the point of using a chemical intervention. Cultural practices like crop rotation or choosing resistant varieties, mechanical management, so tillage or cultivation, using barriers like row covers, which are kind of like thin sheets that we can put over the top of plants to exclude pest insects. And then obviously we have biologicals, so the use of beneficial nematodes or beneficial bacteria that can be used to combat some of the pests that cause damage in the garden. And then the chemical intervention is really our last resort. And these are the principles of integrated pest management, which is what we'll focus on in some detail when we talk about organic gardening.
Then is making the conversion to growing fruits and vegetables at home organically as simple as flipping a switch, that is, going cold turkey? Or does it take a little more of a transition here, Zac?
Obviously, we want to make this presentation and we want to make the topic of organic gardening more than just choosing one product over the other at the nursery or looking for an organic brand, or what we, in the nursery trade, we'd be looking for actually a sticker that says OMRI, which is the Organic Material Review Institute. And usually that label is a good indicator that the product can be used in organic production. But for the garden, it's really trying to encourage folks that it's more than just picking a conventional versus organic product. It's using some of the cultural practices that I just discussed, scouting in the garden, really familiarizing yourself, being a curious gardener, learning some of the insects that are pests in the garden, what their life cycles look like, and really targeting the best times to make treatments or interventions that don't have to just necessarily be chemical. One of the best tools in terms of insect management can be your index finger and your thumb and just manually removing pests from the garden. But it all depends on your scale. And so just going over some of the non-chemical interventions first and foremost, but then also talking to them about some of the commercial products that are available, derived from natural sources, less persistent in the environment in some cases, although there's plenty of organic chemicals that we want to be careful with when we're using them, and realize that they can carry just as much harm as synthetic chemicals. We have a joke in the farm or in some of the garden spaces I've worked in, snake venom is organic, but I certainly don't want to use it in my garden or while I'm farming. So, that's my long-winded response to that, and hopefully I answered the original question.
You did, as a matter of fact. To your thinking, what is the most formidable challenge in making this transition to organic gardening then?
I think truthfully, Eric, most gardeners are probably lean more towards natural interventions or chemical-free. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just being curious, realizing that there are a lot of great resources through the Extension Service in your county or in your district, tapping into those extension educators to help you identify what the pests and disease issues that you have and what your options are. You may decide to kind of find a hybrid of both organic and conventional practices in your garden, but learning more about what the impact of those products are or those cultural practices, trying to tread more lightly and protect some of the beneficial wildlife, because an overwhelming majority of insects and wildlife that we encounter in the garden have a purpose in the environment. And some of the pesticides, for example, that we use are not selective and can be harmful or damaging to beneficial wildlife as much as they are to the pests that we're trying to control.
Well, then, this webinar, the K-State Garden Hour upcoming on organic gardening, ought to gin up quite a few questions on the part of participants, whether they are growing for personal use or for commercial sale out of their own gardens. So how can folks take part in this, Zac?
Well, I think the easiest way, Eric, would be to Google K-State Garden Hour, and it should be the first thing that pops up. It'll take you to characteristically purple K-State webpage with K-State Garden Hour at the top, and then a purple register button at the bottom. We'll start at noon on Wednesday, August 4th. Just hit the register button, give us a little bit of your basic information, and you can join us virtually through Zoom.
It'll run for an hour over the noon hour on August the 4th, and plenty of chances for interaction, questions to be brought up to Zac and the other horticultural agents who will be on board to lend their expertise on this topic as well. Once more, the fall series of K-State Garden Hours resumes this coming Wednesday, the 4th of August at noon. Zac, we wish you the best with the session as it's upcoming. Thanks for giving us a quick preview right here.
Thank you, Eric.
Zac Hoppenstedt, Johnson County Extension Horticulture Agent, with us on this week's K-State Horticulture segment. Our time's away once more. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.